Okay, so we begin with this simple annual budget for projecting income and expense for the year. Now, we've been given assumption or input numbers for January. So what we are basically supposed to do is take January as a base case and then use these quarterly growth rates, okay, to project for each line, right? So we can't change all the numbers in blue, but we need to calculate with these as base. Now, to make this easier for you to calculate, we've covered this video earlier where we calculated all the numbers in under 5 minutes. To make that possible, you just have to determine the patterns. So if you look closely, my calculation for February and March in each case is going to be the same as May and June, because February grows on the first month using this quarterly growth rate. It's the same way May grows on the first month in the quarter here, with the same growth rate positioned in the same manner, right? So what it means is if I'm able to get this full calculation for the quarter, I could just paste the formulas for the third and the fourth quarter, and then we just copy this down smoothly, and we should be able to finish this in less than 5 minutes. So let's see this in action. So the first thing I'm going to do is to calculate 3 unique formulas, one for February, one for March, and another for April. After these 3 calculations, they can have similar calculations across the budget, and that's what we are going to use. So for February, I'll select this, open brackets, 1 plus the growth rate above here. I don't want this to go down, so I'm going to lock this at row level, $sign on row 9. Then I'm going to close my bracket. Right, so this gives me for February. For March grows on February, so I'll open my bracket, 1 plus the same growth rate. So instead of copying right, we are creating it from scratch. Right, so this is going to be locked at row level, and we close our bracket. So we have this. If I do an alt equal to, I basically have concluded the calculations for the first quarter. Now, I just need to add April's calculation. So April grows on March, open bracket, 1 plus this growth rate here, and I'll put in the $sign on row 9. So I now have all the calculations that I need. So if I copy February, March, and even the first quarter calculation, Control C, right? And if you like, paste directly or paste formulas to maintain the format. Right, I have something like this. So if you check, you realize that based on the kind of referencing we used, we can easily copy this across. So we now have this full set for the quarter, which we can copy and paste quarter on quarter, something like that. In fact, as it is now, you could even hold this selection, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then simply drag to the right. Okay, so this will give me the calculation for this quarter, as you can see. I could do the same thing, select this range, and then go all the way up to this point. So again, this gives me the calculation for the last quarter, right? At the end of the year, because I've been consistent with my formula work, I can just stand at the calculation for annual and then execute an auto sum, alt equal to. You realize that it picks all the quarterly calculations as it should, right? So now that we have this first row, we could just simply copy it down now that the pattern has been established, right? So even with that, there's a way we could do it smoothly. So I can highlight the whole of this, Control C. Okay, so at this point, we are just highlighting the first points in February. So I'll select February, hold Control, select 1, 2, 3 cells in February for cost of goods sold. Okay, then for expenses, before you select, hold down Control, select all the cells in February for this. Okay, so once you are here, you could now just paste directly, or you can even paste formulas only, right, to maintain the format. So once you do this, you notice that you now have your formulas nicely calculated, right, without doing a cell by cell calculation. At this point, all you are left with is the subtotals, right? So I'll stand in here, alt equal to, press enter. But before you do that, we need to correct the fact that it's picking the rates, right? So we just need to adjust this to get this 163,700. I'm going to take this, select all the way to December. Right, I want to maintain the format. That's why I'm pasting with just formulas. Okay, so this is going to be for gross revenue. I'll now calculate cost of goods sold. I can take this, copy, highlight the whole of this. Okay, Control Alt V, formulas for paste special, and I have for cost of goods sold. So my gross profit now is going to be a subtraction of the gross revenue and cost of goods sold. Again, I can highlight the whole of the range, okay, at a go. Then in my active cell, I'll come select gross revenue and then subtract it from cost of goods sold. Instead of pressing enter here, you press Control Enter to spread it across, right? So we are almost there. We come down for our total expenses. So auto sum for this. Okay, I can copy this and go all the way. Control Alt V, paste formulas, and we have this. Then for our net profits, again, I can highlight the whole of the range. Okay, come in here in my active cell. I'll calculate the first one. So this January figure, subtracting the total expense for January, Control Enter, right? So in the end, my figure here is 450,299, right? So we did this using the pattern in the calculation to just copy and paste across. Now, this completes the base case, but let's say we want to get this budget to conclude in terms of net profit at 500,000. Okay, so something has to give. Example, if we change sales or we increase sales a bit, we can get that 500,000. This is a typical case for goal seek, where we are changing only one variable. For this figure, you will notice that if I trace precedence, that's the formula that happened before this value, right? We've just traced it to the final calculation that we had over here. Okay, now for these what if analysis tools to work, you need an existing model like this, where inputs and calculations come together to allow you to simulate smoothly, right? So if I continue with my trace precedent, you realize that this is good for simulation because all the calculations are linked together. Okay, so that has to be the first requirement, an existing model with inputs and calculations. Okay, so I'll go ahead and remove the arrows. Now let's try a simple case study where we just want to set this to 500,000 by changing sales in the first quarter for January. Okay, so we'll come to data, what if analysis, and we are going to use goal seek. Okay, so for goal seek, it's pretty simple. We begin by setting our final outcome. So this is the cell that we are changing to 500,000. So I select this, then I have to input the value, the target. So this is 500,000, right? What has to change? This sales figure has to change. So I have C10, right? So this, if I go ahead and simulate, it tells me that we need 140,000. That is the first sales in the first quarter to give us 500,000. Okay. Now, what if I had to change, let's say, the sales and the growth rate for the first quarter? If I have to change more than one variable and then set it in a table so that I can see the different outputs when I combine the first sales and the growth rate. Okay. So I'm going to revert to what we had earlier and introduce you to data tables. Okay. So we used goal seek earlier. We are now going to use data tables to create a combination of outcomes. So to create our data table, this is a two-way data table, right? It means that we'll be feeding it a combination of inputs in rows and columns. To start, you need to reference that final result. Okay, so our 450,299 has to be referenced here. So this is the outcome. So it's formula driven. So after bringing this in, I'm going to put in inputs from a column and then another set of inputs from the row. And this is going to give us the table, right? So first, let's decide. Let's say we are playing with the first sales in the quarter. So this can be an input, first sales. Okay, so let's start off with a raw figure of about 140,000. Okay, so you can paint this blue. Then we can put in an incremental value. Okay, so incremental, so an incremental value of, let's say, 10,000. We are going to use this to create the series. Okay, if you are using dynamic arrays, you could also use sequence to make this easier. So now that you've set out for the first input on the column side, let's do the second input. So this is going to be first growth rate. Right, so again, we set that one, let's say it's 1% currently, and then again we'll put in the increment. We'll put in the increment for this one. Let's also assume this is 1%. Right, so as I mentioned, these are inputs that you can change. Right, so usually for the standard colors for financial modeling is 00255 for the blue color. Right, so now that we have this, I'm going to begin by referencing that first input. Okay, then to get the incremental values to create that series, I can just do a formula. So select this one plus the incremental rates, which I have to lock absolutely, or at the row level if you want to be a bit more direct. Okay, and I can copy this down for about 10 rows. Okay, so then I'll come to the row side. So for the row side, I'm going to reference this first growth rate, and then that one to grows or increases by 1%. So once I reference this, I'm going to lock this at column level. I'm copying to the right, or lock absolutely. Right, so again, I can probably stretch this over 5 columns. So the basic layout is to have your output in the top left corner, and then below it you have your column input, and then your row input also stretches to the right. This will give you the table or the data table for the different outcomes. So basically what we want to do is that if first sales is 140,000 and first quarter's growth rate is 1%, what do we have here? What version of this output do we have here? Okay, so we'll do those combinations to fill the cells that we have. So you highlight the entire range, right? Then you go to data, what if analysis, then you activate the data table. Okay, so it gives us results of multiple inputs. So here you need to be careful. You first need to identify the row input cell, right? So far as the inputs are concerned, these numbers 140,000 going down is sitting in column B, right? That will make it easier for you to identify. And then the rates is sitting in row 45. Okay, so based on that identification, you need to go back to your model and then tell Excel where that row input cell is sitting in the model. So row input cell, which are the rates, sits in the model here. Okay, so I'm going to pick this 1%. Then while I'm here, the column input cell, which are the sales values, will sit here. Okay, so once I've fed these two, I'll click OK and let's see what we get. So once I click OK, you notice that I now have a combination of outputs. So this is the combination of values that we have. So with these values, you can now play with the inputs in terms of the first sales and then the first growth rates. Okay, so if you like, to give you a sense of how this works, if we are at 120,000, okay, you realize that we fall below the target. Okay, to even make it easier, you can set a conditional format, okay, to highlight all the numbers that go beyond your target of 500,000. So we can do a conditional format based on a new rule, okay, using the formula where we say that if any of these values, it has to be a relative reference. So F4, 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 no dollar sign is greater than 500,000. I've put this in here directly. We want to format with a fill color, okay, light shade of green. And then we'll close our brackets. Right, so you realize that at 120,001%, all these numbers above do not meet the 500 target. Okay, so you can, during a presentation, now get a sense of how the first sales for the quarter should be and the growth rate should be. But of course, your existing model has to be established first, which we did earlier. That gave us the 450,299. And the data table now gives us a combination, sales and growth rates, that will give us these various outputs. So hopefully you learned a few things here. Please practice. The start file has been shared with you. You can go through step by step and then also practice with the calculations that we learned. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos, or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.